Communications, Marketing, and Parks and Recreation for the town of Queen Creek. And this is Constance Hallinan Wilson. She is our Public Information Officer. And this is something we have trained our entire staff on because this phenomenon is happening not just in Arizona, it's happening across the nation. And it's something we wanted our team to be prepared for. These First Amendment auditors are not an association. It's not some group. There's no national conference they go to. These are individuals who travel around the country, and in many cases what we're seeing is when they come to your community, they're not from your community. They're coming in from other states. They travel around and they test government employees on their knowledge of the First Amendment. And when they come in filming. And in many cases, they're trying to get a rise out of you. They're trying to prove that government wants to infringe on First Amendment rights. So before we get too deep into the background and everything, we wanted to show you the first video so you get a flavor of what we're talking about. So video 1, please.
Men's services, court, water. Yeah? Oh, good, how are you? Just filming. Huh? I like filming.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all. No.
Okay.
All right.
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you. What was your name?
Tracy Anderson.
Tracy Anderson. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
You too? Huh? Oh, I don't answer questions.
I don't answer, but just take pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thanks, man. What, 4? Just because I want to. Yeah.
I get that, but there are some people here that have privacy laws that you can't just take their picture.
Can you fill me in on that? Can you fill me in on that? I wasn't aware. Could you, what was your name? What's your name?
I don't have to give you my name.
No, I didn't say you did. You work for the city? Oh, cool.
You're gonna have to leave the premises, sir.
No, I'm good. Thank you. There's no, I'm not gonna hurt anybody. You don't need to push the panic button. Did he tell you to push the panic button? I'm unarmed. I'm not gonna panic button. No, yeah, just the guy with the. Okay, I was just wondering who the guy was that freaked out.
No freaks here.
No freaks here. Well, I'm in the wrong place then. All right. Thanks, guys. You too. You guys locking up right now? I got about time for me to get kicked out. All right. Does anybody want to give me his name? I'm just curious. All right. Cool. Have a good one, y'all. I didn't catch your name yet. Hey, I didn't catch your name yet. What was your name? Did you have a name or no? I didn't catch it the first time. All right, thank you. All right, cool. Hey, let me know about those laws if you ever find them, okay? Let me know about those laws if you ever find them. Cool? All right, thanks, man. Have a great day. KRD 9862. Ford Escape.
All right, so a couple things about the video. So it jumped around a little bit, and I apologize, I should have warned you about that. This video is actually about 20 minutes long. So to give you a flavor of how they interacted with different employees, we cut it so you can see a few different pieces, so that's why it was jumping around. And he went into that building about 10 minutes before it closed, so when the employees are getting ready to leave. And so what do you think went well in that interaction?
He didn't say his name.
He didn't say his name? Okay. What else went well?
The first couple of people he contacted were just totally casual about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first woman said, "Hi, how can I help you?" As government employees, I think that's how most of us would respond if we encountered a resident or somebody coming in, whether they're filming or not. Our job is to help the public. So it's natural to come in and say, "Hi, how can I help you?" And when he said, "You can't," I said, "Okay, great, have a nice day." then she went right back to doing her job. And that's our best piece of advice to give to you. If someone comes in filming, because as Marty shared, that's their tactic, is they come in, they try to catch you off guard and they're filming. They say, hi, how can I help you? And they say, oh, I'm just here filming. If you know where they can and can't film, and she knew in that public area, it's okay to film in that public area, go right back to doing your job. And if you do that, they typically move along pretty quickly. And if you notice, when the gentleman in the salmon shirt came out, the individual realized that's the person I'm going to get a reaction from. I'm not going to get a reaction from this woman at the front desk, but this individual who came out, kind of with that air of, what are you doing here? Confrontational a little bit. And our goal is not to criticize these employees, because these are actual First Amendment audits. And they probably didn't have any training. They might not have ever heard of this topic before. So you come out wondering, well, what are you doing here? I want to show solidarity and support my fellow coworkers. So I don't fault him for coming out, but you see right away when he says there might be privacy laws, you can't film here, the First Amendment auditor gloms onto that, because that's not true in a official public area. And what's interesting is we'll talk about, for our town, the most important thing is to work with your town attorney. So Andrew is going to be the expert on this, and we've become best friends with our town attorney, because there's public areas, there's quasi-public areas, there's non-public areas, and in public areas, they have the right to come in and film anything they can see from that public area. So in the lobby, which is deemed a public area, they could walk right up to that counter and zoom in on whatever they can see from that public space. So you may think, well, it's behind the counter, he can't film behind the counter. He can't walk behind the counter, but if he can see it from the public area, he can film it. And that's sometimes where we get people saying, well, but that's not a public area, but he can see it from the public area. So at the end, we'll give the guy in the salmon shirt credit, because he remained calm. He didn't run him over. He didn't hit him with his car door. So he just got in calmly and drove away. So we have had people, a lot of our employees have asked, well, do I have to give my name? And at the end of the day, that's really going to be your organization's call. Our organization's determinations, no, you don't have to give your name. However, it's very easy to find out as government employees what our names are, right? I mean, if someone came in and said, what's the name of your public information officer? They're going to willingly offer it's Constance. And it's also public record. So if they really wanted to go for it, they could submit a public records request and say, what's your public information officer's name? And we'd have to provide it. So what we've seen in watching a lot of these videos is if you don't give your name, that can escalate the situation. So if you're comfortable saying, and you saw the woman at the front desk, hi, my name's Tracy Anderson, and then he moved right along. So they don't really actually care what the name is in a lot of cases. They just want to know, are you going to give me your name? And if the interaction goes well, then they just move along. So that's sort of been my rule of thumb in training our employees. Give your name and your title, but nothing beyond that. Don't give your credentials, what schooling you have, what's made you qualified. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the training. But typically giving your name and your title, and they move right along.
And when Constance talks about they don't really care what your name is, they also don't really care that there's a printer, it's Clorox wipes, and whatever else is behind the counter. One of the questions we've gotten is, if you noticed in that video, it went pretty quick, there's a sign that says no cell phone use at the counter. That's a courtesy. That's not a law. That's not enforceable. You can't get arrested, I'm assuming, for using a cell phone at the counter. So it's a public space. They can film, like Constance said, anything they can see. And what we've seen with this phenomenon, like I said earlier, they're not necessarily from your area. A lot of times they're traveling through. When this movement first started, it really was a test on government. There's folks who really believe my rights are being trounced on, I'm going to go film and I'm going to prove it. However, what happened is they upload to YouTube to share with their followers, and they have lots of followers. And as confrontations happened, because really their goal is to get somebody to grab their camera, police to throw them to the ground, violate their rules, because they are allowed to film in public spaces. So as the confrontations got more and more heated, they got more and more followers, which on YouTube means you can sell more and more ads. So you make more and more money. So this has become a money-making operation for a lot of these folks, and they just travel around trying to find communities where they can get a reaction. So our goal in Queen Creek is to train all of our employees so we take away the element of surprise, because that's really what they're going for. When they come in filming, it's jarring. You're like, what are you doing? This is weird. It's just not normal. It's not necessarily threatening. It's just weird. So if you take away the element of surprise, and you're thinking about how would I handle this, or how would I get out of the situation, hey, I have a meeting, gotta go, good luck with your filming. You become boring. because you saw how quickly he moved along when Ms. Anderson was like, have a great day. If you're boring, don't come back. So our whole goal is for Queen Creek, in this case, to be a very boring community. We want them to go away. And we've had them numerous times through Queen Creek, but we've stayed pretty boring. And we're gonna show you some examples of that later. But what we are finding is, at least in our region, they go into the West Valley and they're right outside of military bases, and folks coming off duty, but they're in their uniforms, do not want to be filmed. So even though these folks have every right to stand on a sidewalk in a public space and film anything they see, they get a reaction. So they've had cameras smashed, they've been pushed, and what happens is now the person who grabbed their camera or pushed them has now committed the crime. So their goal is to be the good guy. They typically know where the boundaries are. They know how far they can walk. They know which areas in general they can go into. Like Constance said, we have found some gray areas in Queen Creek because we're a growing community, so most of our buildings were not built to do what we have them doing at this moment. So we've been working with our attorneys to really determine what is a public space and what isn't. Because we want to follow the letter of the law, be boring, and have them move along their way.
So we've had in our training with our employees, people say, well, what if it makes me uncomfortable? I don't want to be uncomfortable. And from our town management's perspective, when our employees come to work, they shouldn't feel threatened. They shouldn't feel unsafe. And while these individuals are typically not breaking the law, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel unsafe, our message has been to try to tactfully remove yourself from the situation. Now that's obviously the hardest for the people who are frontline dealing with staff, or dealing with the public. So tips we've given to them is, let me get somebody who can help you and step away and get a supervisor who might be better versed at dealing with the individual. But if you ever feel threatened, call 911, because even if they're not breaking the law, it's perfectly fine to have law enforcement come and make sure everything's fine and make sure that it's not escalating. So the next video clip we're going to show you is sort of what to expect if you do call 911 and they're not breaking the law. We in Queen Creek contract with our sheriff's office, so we have a contracted sheriff's department, and our deputies will respond, but if they're not breaking the law and they don't have a more pressing call, they're probably just going to follow that individual around, making sure that they're continuing to stay in public areas, but it at least would give our staff some sense of security that it's not escalating. Now, if you don't feel uncomfortable, you don't need to call 911 if they're not breaking any laws, but it is an option. We just wanted people to understand that if you call 911 and they're not breaking a law, they're not going to make them leave, because it is their right to film in a public area. So this next video, again, was a much longer video, so I cut it to see a few different interactions. And one thing that you'll pick up on in this video is the individuals who are First Amendment auditors typically don't have very positive thoughts on government employees. And so they're coming in sort of the hostile attitude towards us to begin with, and you'll see that in action in this video.
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
Are you filming something?
Yeah.
Or
To film?
do you have a permit or anything for that?
Do I need a permit?
To film inside a city building?
Yeah.
Yes.
I need a permit?
Yeah. Are you with the city?
Am I with it?
Like, do you work for the city of Mesquite?
No.
Okay.
Do you?
Yes. Can I help you with, are you looking for something specific?
No.
Well, do you know what office you're at all?
Mesquite, tourism, and
Yeah. Can I ask what this project is for?
you can ask.
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave the office. What are you here for? I don't need, if you wanna sit down and talk about it?
No, I'm just filming. That's all. Just filming.
Are you filming her, or
Everything I can see from a public space.
is this gonna be used for something?
I don't understand the language.
Oh, no, I just need to, because this is a public, this is our office, so I just need to understand what you're doing. I don't need any events or anything.
So you say I have to have a permit?
Usually, we have, okay.
Well, they said I need a permit, so I was waiting for that permit.
What kind of a permit is it?
I don't know. They said it.
Permit to film?
That's what they told me.
Well,
Yeah, the woman in here told me I need a to do what government does and test whether you know your rights or not. And then if you don't know, they are going to abuse you, as usual. So obviously he seemed like a decent guy right off the bat, but just like all the others, he's going to try to test and see what you do and don't know. And if there's anything you don't know, this tyrant will abuse you. No regard for the law, no regard for law and order, just regard for what he feels like enforcing. His own will.
Alright, so what went well in that video?
The officer kept us cool.
The officer didn't tase them, right?
Wasn't a
we're
tyrant.
this close to each other and they're insulting them. Not only did he keep his cool, I mean, he didn't even let it faze him. He didn't even give him a reaction. At one point, he almost smiled. So the officer did a great job of just ignoring the individual because, as you guys know, people call you names, I'm sure, and you can't let it get under your skin. And that's why it's important for us to train all of our employees because we're not as used to people maybe being as offensive. But just saying you're a tyrant isn't committing a crime. And so the woman who came out on the first part of the video, to her credit, she came out to help the individual. Her goal was to, hi, how can I help you? Why are you filming? And she kept trying to elicit from the First Amendment auditor, I just want to help you. If you tell me what you want, I'll try to help you. But it became kind of painful in this circular conversation where I want to help you, I don't need your help, but I really want to help you. Why do you want to help me? And so what we've talked to our employees about is try to tactfully get out of those interactions. When she came out from her secure area and said, hi, are you filming? And he said, yeah, well, can I help you with something? And he said, no. Okay, great. Have a good day, because he's in a public space. That was a public lobby, and she was behind a secure area. He's not trying to get behind a secure area. He's standing in the public lobby and filming what he can see. He even used the key terms, anything I can see from the public space. So he's done his homework. He knows he's legally allowed to film right there. So she could have come out, can I help you with something? No? Okay, have a great day. And gone right back into her secure area where he can't get to. But again, it's jarring and it feels weird. So we're not criticizing her for calling law enforcement, but we want people to understand they're not breaking the law in most cases, so they're not going to be asked to leave. They're just going to probably be followed around until they decide that they're done. So just some things to keep in mind. So not only can you think about, okay, I'm going to ask, hi, how are you doing? And being aware of, okay, are they in a public area? Is this a non-public area? And then also, if it starts to get into that circular conversation, we had one of the First Amendment auditors come and make contact with one of our park rangers. So our park ranger went up to the individual because he was in his car and sort of driving oddly around one of our parks. And our park ranger, again, is there to make sure everyone's okay. So our park ranger approached the vehicle, said, hi, can I help you? And this individual tried to engage in conversation. So he tried to get our park ranger to talk negatively about the government, to talk negatively about the town of King Creek, and our park ranger did a great job. He never took the bait, but our only piece of advice for him was you could have ended the conversation a lot earlier. Once you realized there's nothing productive going to come out of the conversation, you've asked, can I help you? He has no legitimate requests. You could have said, you know, I got to get back to work, so if you do need something, here's our number to call, and have a great day. Because the conversation went on for 12 minutes. And that, again, just encourages the opportunity to fall into one of their traps. So the sooner you can end the conversation once you realize there's no productive conversation happening or they don't need legitimate help, again, tactfully try to end it, because you can't fault government for that. We have a job to do. And once I realize I can't help you, just like if someone came to the counter, and once you've helped them, you're going to go back to doing your job. So thinking about how you can tactfully end that interaction.
And that police officer, as we've acknowledged, did a great job of keeping his cool. Didn't tase him, all the things that kind of run through your mind. And when we're doing this training, we're talking about taking away the element of surprise for us, because we're trained. But we can only control our reaction. You can't control a resident's reaction or a customer. So in our case, we have a recreation annex that was not built to be a recreation annex. It's actually the back end of our library. And so the lobby area goes down a long hallway, and we have all of these different classrooms where we have dance classes and karate classes and all these things, and every room has a window. And our concern was, these are children. And if we have parents there and this First Amendment auditor walks in and starts filming, people do not want their children filmed. That can get really bad really fast. So in our training, we talk about watching other people's reactions as well. You have to notice, is somebody starting to get elevated? In the first video, the guy says, hey, do you live around here? The response was, I don't answer questions. And that guy was like, okay, kept going about his business. Not everybody's reaction is gonna be, okay. We've seen videos where there was actually a First Amendment auditor who walked into a police department in the lobby, and there was a woman talking to an officer because her daughter had just been arrested. Obviously, this is not a good day. So she's talking about next steps, and she's emotional. So this guy comes in filming, and the officer notices him and says, hey, out of respect, could you not film? And he says, I can film anything I want. I'm in a public space. And the woman is like, no, I don't give you permission. You cannot film me. And the guy says, I can film anything I want. And she attacks him. Now, she's just committed the crime. Fortunately, they're in a police station, so it ends very quickly, and nobody was hurt. But we don't want to be in that situation. You do not want to be a YouTube star in one of these. If you sing, if you dance, be a YouTube star. But in these, you want to try to avoid any escalation, both for yourself and your customers. So in our case, this was one of those kind of weird areas in our recreation annex, what's public, what's not. So our attorneys advised us that the lobby and the hallway are public spaces. But if those rooms are rented, they become private spaces. However, we do have windows in all of those doors because parents also like to film their kids in dance class. So our employees are always on the lookout to see what's going on. That said, you don't always know they're a First Amendment auditor either, because we've had customers who put in plans for review, things like that. They either don't like the answer, don't understand the answer, for whatever reason, they're filming the employee giving them the comments on their plan. They're not a First Amendment auditor, it's not gonna go on YouTube, but they're filming because that's a way of recording what could be complex government instructions, whatever the case may be. So the idea behind all this training is just don't be surprised. Assume you're always on camera. I mean, honestly, for anyone in government, that's just a good rule of law. Just assume you're always being filmed. Somebody's always recording you. Because, you know, we're in a space now, our society, everyone has access to cameras, and you don't always know they're filming you anyway. We had one gentleman, it was weird, he came every day at 1 o'clock and bounced a ball off of one of our buildings. There's a park right across the street. If you wanted to play catch, that's a great place to do it. But he insisted, it was right near a window, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna fly through the window, you know, worst case scenario. But as he continued to come, we believe he was a First Amendment auditor, and he had his camera in his little bag, and he's waiting for someone to come and tell him, you can't do that. Because yes, he can. It's a public space. As long as he's not damaging property, which he wasn't. He's not harassing anybody. He's just doing his thing. So we've seen a variety of tactics in these videos, and Constance, thank you for editing them down because they are painful to watch. And there are thousands of them on YouTube. And I would caution, if you go and look these up, the comments are super gross. They're just vile. The folks who follow this do not have good thoughts about government. But you know, we've seen the tactics change over time. So we're always monitoring, and we communicate with all the cities around us. Hey, we just had a First Amendment auditor. Here was their tactic. Because sometimes they come in jovial, like that first guy, like, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's time for me to get kicked out. They're not always so jovial. So now we're gonna see a visit to Queen Creek.
So in this video, it's a little bit different because we've seen videos where they come into your buildings, and that's probably the most common tactic. But another thing that they do is, as we saw in the first video, they try to go into your parking lots, and in Queen Creek, our employee parking is not a secure area, so it's deemed a public space. So if someone wanted to come and film where we park, they could. Now across the street from our town hall is our post office, which obviously the town doesn't run, that's a federal entity. But their secure parking lot is right along one of our busiest roadways in Queen Creek, which is a public roadway. So these individuals went to the post office after it closed, so they tried to go into the building and it was closed. But then they walked along to the secure gate, but it's a view gate so they could see through it, but they're standing on the public roadway filming into the secure area. So we're gonna watch again, it jumps around so you can see a few of the different interactions, and these individuals started at our Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, so our local substation for our police, and that interaction did not go the way they had expected it to. Our deputies were super friendly. They offered them water because it was really hot outside, so they weren't getting the type of reaction that they were looking for, the kind of reaction that gets them hits. So they went across the street to our fire department. And they were either on a call or didn't hear them, so then they ventured across the way over to the post office. So we will see the interaction with our post office next.
Or are you the new marshal in town, or the new sheriff in town, or what?
No, I'm wondering why you're videotaping a federal facility when you don't work here.
That's why. If we worked there, we couldn't tape it, dummy.
Why are you videotaping it?
I don't know you, so I'm not gonna tell you my business.
Okay.
You're just some guy that pulled up in a car.
Yeah, because I'm an employee here and I'm wondering why you're videotaping our facility. A federal mail facility.
Are you gonna stop melting and acting like a dork, or?
I just asked you a simple question as to why
Well,
why
I'm
you're
just telling you to calm your face down, man. This is a little trouble. I'm just controlling. So talk to me like you're all know. You know what's going on. Okay, I didn't record it there. I couldn't record anything. I was still doing public service. And I was away 3 little words.
You're taking pictures of me and it's my right.
You shouldn't have came up to the camera, you sound dumb. You come up to the camera, you don't want your picture taken. That's not very smart, man. As you can see, we're not blocking the password for this guy. You can come through, you think. I'm out here with Highlands Community Watch. Sorry, Mr. Welcome. The name out here, but we're out here in Queen Creek at a post office. We're approached very violently by, I said rudely at least, by postal employees saying that we're not able to film out here. We have Julian, which is the male you see right here in front of us, who's talking about. Julian is this guy's name. Julian, everybody wave to Julian. On the side of the road, this is public easement here next to the post office. This is, exit only here. We're outside of their gates. Alright, so we're waiting because we want to see the sheriff's educate them. It's way better than having a pistol contest. I'm doing great.
Just wanted to let you know, we informed them that it's not illegal to film. You guys can film all you want. They said that you might be obstructing their flow of conduction. I said, I'm just gonna ask you guys to come, don't obstruct the flow of traffic or anything out here, which you're fine staying
Yeah,
here.
they were standing there talking, so we approached them to talk to them so we can, that's the only time we were right there.
That's fine.
So super obnoxious, right? They were trying to goat the employees, but what they were doing was not illegal. And so they called MCSO. MCSO came and basically had to say, yeah, you're not doing anything illegal. And they know, again, they're not blocking the flow of traffic. They even said, come on, you can fit through here, just to make sure they're not doing anything that would rise to the level of being asked to leave, because they can't impede the job that we have to do. If they're standing in your doorway not letting customers come in, that's different. If they're standing there blocking mail trucks coming in and out, that's different. You can't impede the duties that we do. But they, again, used all those key terms. Anything I can see from a public roadway, we're not impeding traffic. So they can be obnoxious, and it doesn't rise to the level of being asked to leave because they're on a public roadway. And I will say yesterday, your judge was in here. Queen Creek does not have a court, so we have not done any research on courts. And she shared that there are very different rules that apply to a courtroom. So just bear in mind that what we're sharing with you here today does not apply to courtrooms. The state of Arizona worked with the courts to develop their own rules and guidelines, so we just wanted to point out that what we're sharing with you today does not apply to the courts.
But one of the questions we get asked a lot from our public works crews and our first responders is, okay, we're not in a building. We're out filling potholes, or we're on a scene. We're trying to save someone's life. And typically, we have not seen at any point so far them going out to an emergency scene and trying to get in the middle of everything. Because again, they're trying to be the good guys. So if they are impeding life-saving measures, they do not look like good guys. However, when you set up cones, so for all the public works crews, for fire, police, once you set up that barrier, whether it's crime scene tape or cones, that is considered a safer space because you don't need the public in there. It could harm their safety. So for safety reasons, once those cones come up, while they can film from outside, because again, anything you can see from a public space, but they can't come inside those cones to film. So this doesn't just apply to buildings. This is out and about doing your daily jobs. But again, at any point, if you don't feel safe, you call 911. If somebody around you is having a reaction, you call 911. You don't want this to escalate. Anything to keep this from escalating because you don't want violence. And these folks you saw in that last video, the guy's like, you dummy. You know, I mean, they go to name calling, lickety split. It takes very little because if they're not getting a reaction, they're going to try to provoke one in most cases. Again, the tactics have changed over time. And as we've seen this become a more money-making endeavor, the tactics have become more aggressive. We do see more name calling happening now. We also see them come in, and there was one instance where a colleague in Texas, there was a First Amendment auditor that was starting to get on everybody's nerves. So they called the communications director. He came downstairs, and he said, can I help you? And the guy said, what makes you qualified to help me? You do not have to go into your qualifications for the job at any point. He answered, because I want to. How can I help you? And the guy said, your drinking fountain is disgusting. I want you to go over right now and clean it. He said, thanks for your feedback. Next time the cleaning crew's in, we'll make sure that that gets special care. No, I want you to go clean it right now. Go get the Clorox, go clean that drinking fountain. Thank you for your feedback. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Get out of the situation. They're gonna try to provoke. They're gonna try to go down a rabbit hole to get you involved in a conversation. Don't take the bait. So now that you've had the training, you know what you're kind of looking for. So if somebody goes down that bizarre qualifications or, you know, don't take the bait. You know, if they're filming you, we're government employees. We want to represent our community well. We want to represent ourselves well. We don't want to be a YouTube star in one of these videos.
So we do have one more video clip to show you, and this is sort of a happier one because it shows a government entity they have gone through, and this video is like 30 minutes long, and they went through each and every department, and none of them reacted. And I don't know if they had training or that's just their philosophy there, but we picked this clip because the women don't even really look up from what they're doing. Can I help you? No? Okay, great. And they just keep doing what they're doing. But before we jump into that last clip, we want to be able to answer any questions that you guys might have. And if we can't answer them, we will defer to Andrew. Yes.
I just have one question. What is the long-term goal? This is just simply for YouTube, or is this that's it?
Well, it's twofold. So they're making money off of YouTube, but also in communities where you are infringing on their First Amendment right, they're suing the community.
Okay,
so
that
they're
was
making money
my question.
on two
Okay.
different ways.
Okay.
And so when we talk about the public spaces, quasi-public spaces, the attorneys will go into a lot of detail of what constitutes what. And really it comes down to what can your attorney defend. So if your attorney is going to say, this is a public space, they can film here, but this is a non-public space, it really comes down to what your attorney feels that they can defend as to why the public shouldn't be able to access this area. And in Queen Creek, we have a couple different fire stations, and two are very clear. We have regular lobbies, those are public areas. Anything outside of the lobby is a non-public area. We have another fire station. It wasn't built as a fire station, it's a modular building, so there's no lobby. So off the bat, we thought, okay, well, there's no public area. We can just put up a sign that says non-public entry. But we have our sand there for sandbags, so when there's a storm, Public Works drops it off, which makes it a public area. So we can't pick and choose when you can come in to that area. So what we had to settle on with our attorney is all of the space around the building, the public can access, so we can't prohibit them from coming in and filming around the buildings, but we put up signs on all the entry points that anywhere inside the building is a non-public space. So again, it really comes down to what your attorney has to weigh, your First Amendment rights, but also the course of doing business as a government entity, and what areas should be deemed non-public.
So they're not going after the individual that's on camera. It's the actual town entity.
Unless they get attacked. So if somebody pushes them, grabs their camera, throws it to the ground, then they go after that person and press charges. So we've seen that a lot. Because if you take a phone, I mean, phones are $1,000, that's significant. So once they smash the phone or they've been pushed or whatever, they will go after the individual. In general, like the guy in the salmon shirt in the first one, he didn't do anything. I mean, other than coming out, you know, ready to throw down, he didn't throw down. If he did throw down, they would have gotten him. So that's where typically no, but if you do something that you've now violated a law, they will go after. But like Constance said, there's a lot more money to be made suing government entities.
Yes.
In the building you were talking about where, you know, you've got that public hallway and you've got all the rooms with windows, I'm assuming pretty much like these doors have. Is there anything that prevents you from just putting a piece of paper or whatever and covering that window?
No, we'd be perfectly okay to do that. The reason we don't is because our parents want to be able to see into
Right,
those
but-
rooms. So but yeah, our attorney said you can cover
But having something available to where you
Mhm.
can, you know, one of us or whoever can duck in and say, hey, you got a guy out of your video and
Yep.
you're done.
Yep.
Thanks.
And again, we thought, and we learned a lot in this process, we thought those rooms were going to be considered public because the building is public. But because they're renting it, that becomes non-public. So again, it gets super complex, and it comes down to what your attorney weighing the laws feels is okay and what's not. Yes.
So, where I work, it's a revolving door. We've got people coming in and out all the time. They're coming in to take care of bills, building permits, whatever. They'll bring their children with them. What if somebody comes in and is filming, but there's children in the lobby? Where do we take care of that?
They can film because they have
They
their
can
kids in
film
a
those
public
children.
area. You're giving the right to film their kids.
But
it's-
if their parents, let's
Mhm.
say that their parents are seeing what's going on and they confront that person, I mean, as staff, we try to keep everything calm.
Call
How do
911.
how are we to
Because these
react to
fine
that?
people are very well versed in trying to keep the peace. And another thing we've talked to our staff about, if you're conducting a credit card payment, which happens in our lobby, and you're dealing with somebody who comes in filming, stop that credit card payment because you don't want to share that over the video, change it to how's the weather, or say, you know, I'm so sorry, but could you come back later and handle this? And then make a note on the account so that they don't get dinged for it. But try to de-escalate that situation and prevent it from even happening. So if you see someone coming in filming and there's a family there with kids, you know, is there an area where you could invite them back to continue the interaction? Is there a room where you could say, you know, I think that this would be taken care of better if we go back over here and try to separate the people. But if you see the parents start to react, call 911.
Okay.
Yes.
So my question was tying into what.
Did you raise your hand? Spencer, did you raise your hand?
He did, he actually did. You know what? That's a good conversation.
Be boring. So mine ties into what you were saying just a bit ago in regard to data safety. Since I work in IT, this kind of brings up all kinds of concerns of mine as far as screen safety, keyboard, you know, watching someone doing entries on their keyboard, things like that. So have you guys taken steps in your organization to try to hide any kind of keyboards? Because, you know, some
Yeah.
people do stupid things like putting their password on their screen.
Yeah.
And things like that, which is viewable
Yep.
on.
That's a good
This is just the police department.
Yes, yes. So we have it. And our first tip, you know, we're fortunate in our main building that we really only have one workspace that is viewable from a public area. And we trained that group first because unfortunately, those are likely the people who are going to interact with our First Amendment auditors. And our key messages to them were minimize your screen. If you're working on something that's not public, that's the other thing to consider. As government employees, most of everything I do on a daily basis is subject to public record law anyway. So most of what I do is not going to be an issue if they record, but passwords, credit card information, you know, HR, there are certain departments that it is much more sensitive. So yeah, we talked to them about minimizing their screens. We also worked with IT to get the little covers for the screens where if you're not at the perfect angle, you can't see what's being done on the screen anyway. And then also, yeah, make sure in general you don't have your passwords taped to your computer screen, but particularly because even if it's not a First Amendment auditor, anyone from the public can come in there. So that's just ongoing training we try to do with our frontline staff anyway, that, you know, if you don't want the picture of your kids in the First Amendment auditor video, don't have it up. And as sad as that sounds, those are just things to consider if your workspace is in the public view.
So,
I'm just gonna ask the gentleman right behind you. Do you have
Oh,
something to add to the
I
police?
just wanted to ask you, how, you know, obviously we have some buildings here the same way we're using them for things that weren't designed for. So how are you guys dealing with areas that are like really not defined? And your guys' office is what's coming to
Well, we
mind
have
for
a
me.
plan.
Because, yeah, right now, currently you walk in and you're in a public area sort of, but there's just a desk there, there's Tiffany's, then only your door. So
And
we
I
have
was
kind
gonna
of,
bring that up. So we do. I feel like the HR department has a very gray area. I feel like the HR department is in a gray area of what's public and what's private. When you walk in the room, if you haven't been to HR, please come visit. But if you've been there, you know that it's open to the public. However, Tiffany's private workspace is right there. So we have devised a plan, a very simple plan, where we don't have to talk to one another. We can both get up and say, we're running out to a meeting. If you'd like to set up an appointment or come by another time, please feel free. And we'll walk out the door, and we're going to go straight to Public Works in the private area. So we have a plan. So that's how we're going to tackle it.
But in the interim, while they're in there filming that, what are we defining as a public area versus a private area there? You understand my?
I think I believe the attorney needs to give us more direction.
Well, I'm just looking from our standpoint of responding over there so that happens. Are you guys getting out?
Yeah, I think we're going to just get up and leave ASAP once we recognize that they're a First Amendment auditor and not an applicant or, somebody from the public.
On that note, for them responding, and this just came to mind because I was talking to Crystal about public and non-public. Our pool facility, we actually had a lady come in last year that was filming across the facility. And there was a couple people that brought it to my attention, and I watched her for a few minutes, and it wasn't someone that I recognized. When you're there every day, you know who's there for swim lessons, you know who's there for aquafit. I didn't recognize her, and so after a few minutes, I did walk up to her and just said, is there something we can help you with? Are you looking for someone? And she said, oh no, my son's swimming. So that was one of those instances where obviously everything was fine, but for them responding to the pool, we have Paulden Plunge, we have programs in place for kids to come without parental supervision that we're kind of in a position to, in a sense, oversee those kids. I mean, more for them to respond if we called and said, hey, there's some guy out here like videotaping kids. That would be a super awkward position for everybody because, we're at a position to kind of watch those kids essentially.
Yeah. And we're in the same boat. We have splash pads and we have had creepers.
Really?
So typically the First Amendment auditors are all about the government employee. They're coming after staff. So the way that we've kind of trained our staff is if you see somebody filming those kids, call 911. Like if it's not a parent, we're just going to go straight to 911.
Well, because human trafficking is crazy right now. People are like, and parents would be, if we just let that go, I think it'd be like a huge thing.
And there are some creepers out there.
Yeah.
So
we can't make them leave for that.
I was going to add
that? We can't make them leave for that, for filming children, because I've had that issue where, you have a bus stop and the kids are consistently like running through the, property owner's yard and they're mad and stuff, and so they're filming at the bus stop. Parents are livid, but they're in public and there's nothing we can do about it.
So quick question on your pool, do you charge a fee?
We do.
Okay, so from our attorney's perspective, and confirm this with Andrew, but when you charge a fee, you're now a quasi-public area. So if you charge a fee, then they'd have to pay to come in, and they typically don't do that because then it's a quasi-public area, so you do have a little more leverage if there's a fee. Our splash pads, we have no fee, so that's why it's a public area. So you're right, if it's a public area, they have the right to film.
Unfortunately for them, you guys are up next to the community center, they could film from the outside.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they can see everything.
But from our perspective, most of the time anyway, we're looking at keeping the peace, so if they become disorderly, then we'll deal with it from that perspective. But, and we'll do what we can to try and identify who they are, but obviously we're not gonna proceed if they're not breaking the law.
Right, and we can sit there and wait them out if we have the opportunity, and then when they go to get in the car and we run their plate and they jump back out, why are you running my plate? Because your vehicle is in a public place and
That's true.
That's true. So when they're sitting there calling you names and stuff, that's not considered harassment?
So there's a difference between calling somebody a dummy and straight up cursing at somebody. If they're doing that to the point where they're becoming disorderly, then we deal with it from the standpoint of disorderly conduct, which is against the law, not the filming or any of the other stuff that they're doing. We're dealing with it from a stance of you're being disorderly, you're disrupting somebody else's peace, and now we're going to deal with you on the criminal nature of that occurring, if that makes sense.
And that's why we call 911, and they get to that point because they don't give us a badge and a gun, and they don't let us make those decisions in Queen Creek, which we don't understand why. But again, to your point, calling someone a dummy, our officers have said, no, that doesn't rise to the threshold. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling threatened, if you're feeling like this person just will not leave me alone, you don't have to decide what is harassment. Call 911 and let them figure it out. We just want our staff to know it may not rise to that level, even if you think it should. So we just want them to be prepared that, and it may have escalated to that point. But if they are just standing there filming, Likely it hasn't risen to that point, but our deputies are still absolutely going to respond, and they're still absolutely going to help keep the peace. We just want our staff to be prepared. They're not going to instantly walk in and haul them out. So that's just setting the expectation so our staff isn't frustrated with our deputies when they don't respond the way they think they should.
And honestly, it then puts the focus.
I was just gonna say.
We end up becoming the focus, and you guys can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enough.
And that's why, honestly, at the Arizona League of Cities and Towns, when I got the phone call to come and present about First Amendment auditors, I was on a panel with all of the attorneys for all the police departments, and they thought this only happened to police because that was absolutely their first target. Because again, their goal is to get thrown to the ground and handcuffed and all this other stuff. So those attorneys were like, "This is happening in other public spaces." We're like, "Yeah, it's happening all over the place in parks and municipal buildings and all kinds of stuff." So it was a very good learning process for all of us. And like Constance said, we have become best friends with our attorney because there are so many nuances to this. And if there's a silver lining, at least it starts the conversation. So like here with your HR department, it's a good conversation to have because maybe it's not a First Amendment auditor, maybe it's just a member of the public. But it's good to know what are your public spaces, what are your private spaces. So at the very least, it's starting a good conversation, and hopefully you never have to deal with someone calling you a dummy, whether they're filming or not.
And locally for our people here, so you guys
Did you raise your hand?
Please, no.
You did
not. I'm going off of Spencer's hand later. For you guys locally, so you guys know, we all, on the police department runs body cameras too, so we're getting video footage of these people as well, and we know that we're within the confines of that. And then, we then disseminate that information out to other departments if we need to. Hey, this guy showed up here. So all that stuff is there for us. I don't even know if all you guys know that we're running body cams all the time, so. Sorry,
I didn't know
Crystal.
that, but that's good to know, cause we would probably have to rely on you in certain circumstances, especially with the pool. That was my biggest thing, was that's to diffuse a situation like that. Then you have parents looking at what's going on and causing a scene. Then you've got, I could just see that
and
becoming.
I think that's the situation though, once you see that person and you can't help them, they don't need anything, you just call 911 anyways and just have an officer there in case you have an irate parent that sees it and all of a sudden freaks out, because then you guys are already there to diffuse the situation, and then it takes the pressure off of us.
Which sounds like overreacting, but if I was a parent and there was a guy filming kids at a pool, I would want to know why. If my son's at the pool, so I would understand from the other perspective. But that was obviously we wouldn't have any jurisdiction to say anything to him. We couldn't tell him to leave. So yeah, that's good to know, because I wouldn't have known that. So
I answered my own question.
So we did give you guys a tip sheet, and if you do have additional questions, they have our contact information, but if it's specific, is this a public or non-public area, Andrew's going to be your best bet. That's your town attorney to figure out, really what can he defend, what does he identify as a public and a non-public area. And our really overarching message is just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. A lot of these examples are frustrating for all of us, and as government employees, this is just one more thing we have to think about going through the course of our day, and we're trying to provide quality public service. And this just throws a wrench in it because we want to provide good public service, but when you have somebody who's trying to get you in a circular conversation or trying to make you look bad, it just adds one more challenge to that. So we're not here defending these individuals. We're not here trying to explain it. We just want you guys to think about it and be aware of it so that if it happens, you can be thinking about how you would respond. So this last video, again, we like it because of how the staff are just like, whatever, do your thing. And at the end, you'll hear them say, "Oh, that's a pass," and that's their arrogant way of saying, "Well, this is how government should run." So they've given this community here a pass. And ultimately, at the end of the day, as Marty said, our goal is to be boring. So in Queen Creek and Chino Valley and Arizona in general, that way they just drive around our state and try to get better footage elsewhere.
Hello, how are you ladies doing? Good, we're just taking some video.
Cold out there today, huh?
That's a bit chilly. Yeah. Especially if you're from Florida.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't.
Have slices out there, huh?
It is right on it.
Yeah, we tried. Okay, so the parcel ID for that is plat 10.
seen in watching way too many of these videos, if you don't react, if you don't try to infringe on their First Amendment right, if you know where they can and can't film, for the most part, they're gonna move along. It's when you start to question, can they film here? So if you don't know, try to find out, because again, that's gonna put you in a better position, and then be thinking about how can I tactfully get out of this situation, because obviously as government employees, we're busy, so you're well within your right to say, I have to get to a meeting. If there's nothing I can help you with, I have to move along. And in most cases, when we see that, they do move along pretty quickly. All right.
Thank you guys all so much for coming today and taking the time, and hopefully Chino Valley will be as boring as we.